What's up, everybody? Welcome to the View from Jamestown podcast edition. This is episode 41. This is the June 2020 episode. We're sitting down with TCC President Robb Roach, VP of Sales and Marketing AJ Petrarca and Cory Mullins, and Latin American Operations Manager Javier Fernandez. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning,
Ben.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Doing well.
We had some faces back in the TCC offices, which is nice to see. Nice change of pace from everyone being home.
I'm the only one here in the office, but I'm in the office, so we're making progress, Ben.
Making progress. Hopefully, we were just talking, maybe this will be our last go-to meeting podcast. It'd be nice to get back for July and be in the same room again, but I guess we'll see how stuff shakes out here over the next couple of weeks.
That would be nice. We got some hope here in Rhode Island. The rate of infection has declined dramatically, and we're hoping it continues. So there's definitely some hope, and I think that across the country things are looking to improve. So we have hope, and we're determined to get back to work here in the office as quickly as we can, but more importantly, as safely as we can.
Yeah. So we're all still working remote, starting to have some people trickle back into the office as it makes sense and as needed. Like Rob said, Rhode Island definitely seems like it's getting a little bit better. We're, I think, in phase 2 officially now of trying to reopen, and starting to see that, I think, from a lot of customers in different areas, both in the States as well as Mexico and Latin America. Seems like stuff's hoping to start getting a little bit better, and there's at least plans in place, if not already in motion, to get back open. Seems like stuff's picked up a little bit this week overall in terms of new projects, and at least starting to have conversations about upcoming raw material needs and getting plants up and running and all that good stuff.
It's been a long haul. Last 3 months it felt like 3 years, and we've had some good demand in personal care stuff, and some things have done well, but the general polymer coatings, this type of business has really fallen off, and now people are finally starting to look at, they've worked off some inventory and starting to look at purchases, and things are looking positive. So it's a good sign for the coming summer and getting the economy back up and steaming again.
Yeah, and Javier, I know you've been talking to some of your contacts in Mexico and other regions of Latin America. Obviously, Brazil was one of those areas that was hit the hardest, but I think you said seems like stuff was starting to pick up a little bit and at least having those conversations.
Yeah, they're starting to meet and to see when are they coming back. Most of them are coming back June 15th, which is 2 weeks from now. So that's promising. But definitely there are some countries that, like Brazil, that they're not doing very well. But Mexico, it's somehow making it happen.
Yeah, it seems like Brazil and India are the hot spots right now, at least for the information that they're giving. Whether it's true or not, we have no idea, but India is going through a real hard time right now with a steep increase that we were seeing a month and a half ago, and same with Brazil. So we hope it works out quickly for them and things improve. It seems to me that the coronavirus seems to have a lifespan, at least this spring it did, and it's declining. Hardest we're here in Rhode Island, which is between Boston and New York. Obviously, New York was the hardest hit in the whole country, and Boston wasn't far behind. We've managed pretty well here, but we did have a tremendous amount of casualties from this awful virus. So, it feels like we've been running a marathon for the last 3 months here with nothing to do. But it's exhausting, and now we have riots across the country. Unrest, upheaval. George Floyd incident was a very sad, horrible tragedy, but I think there's a lot more to it. I don't see things shaping up too well in that situation. Unfortunately, today they're having a memorial for George Floyd, and there's finally some semblance of healing, and that's what I think this whole country needs right now is healing. For those of us that we didn't lose in the coronavirus, it's time to heal. And unfortunately, the George Floyd incident set off some pretty massive and violent protests worldwide. So it's like nothing I don't think anyone on this podcast or anybody watching this podcast has ever experienced. So we're navigating in uncharted waters still.
Yeah, it just seems like it's been quite the, I guess, equation of different things going on and trying to figure out how all these different things are going to affect, business and production and trying to get back to somewhat normal. Obviously, the coronavirus was a huge issue, and then now these protests across the country and really across the world are all going to factor into stuff reopening and demand reopening and people going back to work. It's going to be, I think, still an interesting few weeks and months throughout the summer and even into the fall of how everything's going to get back to some semblance of normal.
There's also hurricanes in the Atlantic already. It's
Yeah.
it's crazy times. I mean, if you think it can't happen, it's going to happen.
Yeah, tropical storm in the Gulf too. It's which way is it going to go?
Yeah, what's the name? Armando? Something like that.
What are we doing here at work? I mean, who knows what the future looks like here.
You talk about running a marathon. I feel like I've been running a marathon in knee-deep sludge with a parachute back behind me. It's obviously I'm making light of it. It's just one of those, oh my gosh. Let's get through 2020, man. It's going to be the year we look back on.
Yeah, Cory, you're down.
I think I said the meme out to you guys. If 2020 was a truck, it'd be a Ford.
I saw that.
I'm just joking, all you Ford drivers out there, but you might want to try something else out. But God.
I love my Fords. But I'm a Dodge guy now, man. I like those Dodges. They're good.
You're converted.
I'm converted.
Seen the light. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Benny.
No worries. I was gonna say, Cory, you're down in the Dallas area, so obviously you're dealing with both customers and suppliers throughout Texas, really for the most part. Obviously, such a hotbed for the petrochemical industry. I mean, what's the kind of feeling, and are people going back to work, or what's the overall sense, both from your customers and upstream on the supplier side, with everything going on?
Yeah, the ones I'm talking to is similar to what Javi's saying. We're hearing returning to work. If it's the purchasing side, returning to the offices. Obviously, certain plants have continued to run, maybe on skeleton crews, but there appears to be this common theme of returning back to work within 2 weeks. Some of the buyers that I'm talking to, and I guess even suppliers, are saying we probably won't welcome anybody into the office, to call on us probably until the end of the month. Maybe June 30 deadline is what I've heard on actually receiving visitors in the office. So, a little bit away, but still good news, right? And it's light at the end of the tunnel. But it's picking up. I see restaurants busier now. Everybody's trying to do their part to follow the guidelines and stuff, and the 6 feet apart and all that fun stuff. But I see cars moving around. We're seeing it in reports on methanol that driving's picking up. So MTBE should start to improve a bit. But not to answer your question, yeah, it seems 2 weeks. Get back into the flow of things. Into the month, maybe start thinking about receiving outside visitors in to talk about supplied, directionally pricing, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what some of those customer visits and plant visits look like post coronavirus, with whether you got to mask up and wear gloves or sit on opposite ends of the conference room table. It's gonna be interesting to see what customer visits looks like here in the next couple of months.
I'm gonna go get a welding helmet. I think they'll let me in.
And AJ, I guess I'd ask you the same question. I know you do a lot up here in New England, both locally in Rhode Island and Mass, and obviously one of these super densely populated areas that we saw hit pretty hard from the coronavirus. You see kind of the same thing. Some of your customers starting to go back to work and get to some semblance of normal here.
Yeah, I mean, most of the folks that we deal with on the supply side and the customer side, we're essential businesses, so they've been operating, whether at reduced rates or with reduced crews. They've been operating all throughout this thing. But we're starting to have people talk about, if somebody was working from home, they're starting to talk about, coming back to the office now, getting kind of similar to Cory towards the end of this month. It seems like most folks are going to start trickling back in. But even people that, were essential, and, I'm hearing from some customers, they were essential businesses and they still decided to send people home as almost a stress test to see if they could operate remotely or to what level they could operate. So that's kind of interesting that people took this as an opportunity to kind of test their systems and things like that. And, but yeah, starting to see demand pick back up. The past 2 weeks, everyone's been talking, that things are going to start picking back up. But finally this week, we're starting to see some things starting to move, and some signs of the light at the end of the tunnel. So that's some good news this week.
Yeah, it feels like we are starting to hopefully get to the end of all this. Obviously now these riots and different things going on have kind of thrown a wrinkle in the whole plan. But yeah, it seems like people are optimistic, which is at least good. Cory, you mentioned wearing a welding helmet. My dad sent me these things. You put a brim of a hat right here, and then it sits on your face. So I guess we're all gonna be wearing these things in meetings now.
I gotta buy stock in whoever's making those. They might make me rich.
You're not kidding.
Now you know exactly when your breath isn't smelling right. That's always blowing back in your face.
It's actually really good news that there's a high demand for plastics, polyethylene, polypropylene. I mean, that just means that the oil needs to keep coming out of the ground and going through the system, and there's an abundance of raw materials for chemical production because of that. So the polyethylene, the polypropylene producers are cranking right now, and so therefore the oil cracking and the whole system is still in place where it could have really failed if there wasn't that exceptional demand from plastics. So it's been a lifeblood, a savior for what could have broke down the whole chemical industry. If there wasn't that demand, then the oil would have stayed in the ground, and there wouldn't have been C4s and butadiene and propylene and benzene and all these things that are needed to make what we sell. So that mask right there is a very important component to the health of our industry right now.
Yeah, obviously the whole situation's unfortunate and wish people weren't sick and weren't dying from it, but as part of it is kind of a bright spot in terms of we've talked about before, the petrochemical industry and the plastics industry, and really shows the importance of these single-use plastics and PPE and all this stuff that wouldn't exist otherwise if it weren't for the plastics industry and the petrochemical industry. So at least an opportunity for the whole supply chain to kind of step up and be able to provide these raw materials, and even in some situations donate raw materials for sanitizer production and all that stuff. It's been good to kind of see everyone almost come together and be able to provide raw materials for everything going on.
As well as the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry has really stepped up. I mean, there's some really bright news about a vaccination, and possibly, I mean, Fauci said the other day, I think yesterday, that they're looking at having a lot of vaccinations in the beginning of 2021. So there's some very powerful people that are saying that it's imminent, and I think there's going to be a treatment, obviously, beforehand. Again, the pharmaceutical industry is working very hard to come up with a treatment. We have seen some benefits of the remdesivir, I believe, and some other drugs. Russia's testing a particular drug, and so yeah, I think the fact that the incidences of the outbreaks have slowed in certain parts of the world is giving us more time to find a treatment. So again, back to being hopeful. Let's hope and pray that this all continues and runs in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned a little bit earlier, that we're seeing crude oil start to tick back up. Obviously went below zero, I think it was in April, and it's kind of steadily made its way north again. Since then, I think we're back up to somewhere around $35, $36. So starting to creep back up, which I think we're kind of seeing should continue to happen here for the next couple of weeks and months.
Well, that's what I was going to point to just a second ago, is, I mean, the signs are there, right? I mean, I know that, there's a lot of pent up demand to be made up. We've been down for quite a while, but I mean, you look at propylene in Europe, what's up, what it settled up June at $60. I just read in one report that I guess propylene's tight in Northeast Asia, I guess because monomer demand is up, and there's some planned and unplanned outages going on there. Plasticizers, I believe, pricing is up there. I know 2EH and butanol are both, from a price perspective, up in Asia. the outlook on propylene in the U.S. I think it drops for June, but then beyond June, it starts to make that move upward. We've seen pricing on imports like 2EH; those prices have started to come up. So, it's good. A lot of positive things coming out of methanol too, with like I said, with driving and that relationship to MTBE and possibly biodiesel. But yeah, I think there's some good signs. I mean, and a lot of what I read, it talks about maybe July is kind of the date where this we really start to see a lot of this come to fruition. I think over the course of this month, hoping everything holds as it is now, is that that maybe that starts to gain some traction. Fingers crossed. I hope that's the case.
Yeah, I think he's onto something. I think there is, we've been since March 14th when we shut the office down. We've really been operating as if we were working out of an office or working as we were. It took us a little bit to come up with a plan on how to work for the last 3 months, and this type of venue here where we're having video conferences has become widely popular. To me, it was kind of interesting in retrospect how stressful that was. I mean, you think, hey, video conferencing, there's not much stress. I mean, we were constantly on these video conferences. They called it, what do they call it, Zoom fatigue or something like that. I mean, I honestly worked harder the last 3 months than I have in a long time because of the anxiety and the fear of what was happening. It's just, even though you weren't physically in a plane or flying to Asia or flying to Europe or in meetings, it was, like Cory said, running, a marathon in knee-deep sludge with a parachute on is a great analogy for what the last 3 months felt like. So, all this, the stock market rebound, oil rebounding, demand rebounding, what a relief. It's like, it's like putting a needle in a balloon, and never mind the stress and the fear and the anxiety of, is your family going to get sick? Are you going to get sick? Is, the people that are at risk in your family going to get sick? I mean, that anxiety was tremendous. So looking forward to putting 2020 behind us.
Yeah, I think a good note there from Cory too. With it does kind of seem like July might be this month where stuff starts to kind of pop off a little bit. Up until now, it's kind of been, at some point it's going to pick back, some points will pick back up, and now it seems like we at least have some semblance of a timeline, which is good, for planning purposes, for inventory purposes. Hopefully, stuff we start to see really turn around here in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Well, Cory, you weren't here, but we had lunch yesterday, all of us, at a restaurant.
It was amazing.
Really?
We got served and everything.
No kidding. You didn't sit out in the cars and they threw the food to you? You actually
we actually sat at a table together.
Look, but back to the point of, if we're making that turn, right? Maybe to your analogy of popping the balloon, we put a hole in it and we're slowly letting the air out, right? I mean, it's not going to be just a big burst, I don't think, but the signs are there. I think. I mean, knock on wood. I'm not some expert or some serious analyst or anything, but just looking at, like AJ was alluding to earlier, just the phone calls and the emails and solicitations for pricing and samples, and those are good leading indicators to an extent, right? So I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to be optimist here, but like you said, Rob, the last few months have been just freaking dreadful. I'll take anything at this point and hang on to it, right? So we'll see. I'm feeling positive about it.
You may not consider yourself an expert, but we're a microcosm of a much larger situation here. I mean, just to give you some idea, our business in May was 50% of what it should have been. 50%. We're down 40% April, 50% May, but already June looks better than May almost. So, but I mean, at the restaurant we had to scan a little barcode to get the menu. We had servers with masks and gloves on. We had, instead of them putting a bottle of ketchup on the table, you had the little individual packets, so it's a different world we're living in now, but it's a relief to be able to have that time together that we spent. I mean, we've been apart for now 3 months. It wasn't stressful. We weren't talking too much about work. It was just nice to be together, and if anything good comes out of that, it's that your appreciation for what you had and what you have. So, that's it did feel good to be with you all yesterday and sit in a restaurant. This is what we've become used to, and it's nice to have it back. Maybe temporary, maybe not. We'll see.
Javier even had a beer on tap just to make sure the tap lines were still working okay.
Yeah, it felt great having the first beer in 3 months on draft.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Did you say first? Oh, on draft. All right, I get it.
On draft. No, on draft.
Tap lines are still working though. You know, they were maintained over the last 3 months. Okay, tasted okay.
It'd be good.
He's
Yeah,
like
because
the
they get a
nectar
good
of the
job.
gods.
All right, moving on to price updates and trends here. Obviously, we talked about a little bit with crude coming up for June. We've kind of seen a tick up for the last couple weeks and anticipate it's still going a little bit higher. So even though demand may not be where it was or where we'd like it to be, seems like there may be some price increases potentially in line for the next month or two. You know, if things keep rising. Is that kind of what you guys are seeing with your products, or what's kind of the overall feeling on price?
Yeah, we're seeing on some of the more seasonal products that are strictly supply demand driven, like urea, we're starting to see some softness as we're getting out of the spring demand season. But that's just, you know, typical of every year. That market has kind of been insulated from what's happening with the economy and, you know, with demand overall, because, you know, people are still planting and, you know, feeding their livestock and things like that. So you know, but that's, you know, other than that, I think, you know, we've seen some things seem like they've sort of bottomed out. You know, I think Cory could speak to it, but we've seen, you know, some strength in the spot methanol market, right?
Actually, not U.S. yet, but in Europe we have, and I was going to talk about that because I want to say as of last week we saw a little uptick in the European spot market. 5 cents a gallon, not much, but it is, again, like we were talking about. It's hopefully a turn in the tide. What's attributing to that is we've seen some idling of plants in Trinidad. We know that Russian capacity is running at some reduced rates. Overall, I mean, methanol I think we're finally stable in the U.S. spot market. We saw a contract drop 7.5 cents for the month of June. We're finally on parity with Europe. The European spot market's kind of jumping up a bit. I think the thing to watch for is that, you know, they're entering into Q3 negotiations on methanol, so that could be pretty telling as to where that goes. Does it remain flat? Do producers, suppliers feel like maybe there's an uptick and they, you know, maybe there's some room there? I don't know. China inventories are still super high. And Iran capacities are running. That there was a rumor out there that maybe they weren't running at full rates. They're not. Well, I wouldn't say they're running at full rates, but they're running stronger than was expected. So that'll have an impact. So that may put some pressure on China. Unless we start to see this return of some production formaldehyde, acetic acid, those key derivatives that may help draw that inventory down, and then you can find a home for the cyanurium material. A lot of ships backed up on the coastal inventories of China right now. So, you know, we'll see. I feel confident about it. I like the fact that it started to stabilize. So maybe that's a sign in and of itself. Yeah, and then we saw, like I mentioned before, you know, propylene's up in Europe, 2EH. We saw some import prices up. There's some competitives across the country in the U.S. here, but it's pockets of competitiveness. You know, 2EH is rolled. Butanol's rolled, I guess. So I don't know. It seems, I would say, with methanol flat to maybe down until we see China that inventory start to really work itself down. Oxos flat to possibly up, right? Depending on when propylene starts to move up in the U.S.
Yeah, I would concur that we've sort of hit the floor on most of the products that I manage and look at, and you know, some have already started to rebound. I mean, just the gas pump, the price of fuel up here went up 10 cents a gallon yesterday. I did talk to a friend of mine that manages marine traffic coming and going into New York and New Jersey. 2 weeks ago, there were 18 vessels at anchor waiting to unload fuel, gasoline. And that's they've actually started to move. Just going out on the road myself, driving, I'm seeing far more traffic. I mean, it was an absolute dead zone just a couple weeks ago. So, you know, most of this means that, you know, inventories will start to move out of their tanks and start to get refreshed as demand improves. We'll see if some rationalization that's happened over the last 3 months will have an effect on raw material costs, because a lot of plants have idled, slowed down, shut down, cut production. And that typically has a more long-term effect on prices moving upward. And so we'll see. You know, the real concern is there a second wave in October, November, where we have to lock down again? The longer more time goes by, the more we understand the virus and see whether or not that will happen. That will be very interesting. I mean, I think that's what we're sort of keying in on right now. Love to see the demand rebound here in June, July, August. But if it gets cut off again for the next flu coronavirus season, that's going to be devastating.
And one other thing, and I know we've talked about it on this podcast before, and it should be always reinforced, is, you know, inventories have been drawn down for the last 3 months, right? So as demand starts to turn back around, there could be a gap in filling that demand right off the bat, right? There could be some very low inventories out there, which could push the buy side, the consumer side, to really, you know, really start to hammer out the orders to start to pick up on that demand, right?
Yeah, and this has been a single issue. I mean, it's been coronavirus. It's been a single issue problem that's brought us into a lot of new issues, you know. But that issue being coronavirus, as long as that's, you know, continues to be quelled, things should improve. And you know, so absolutely.
Yeah, and Javier, I think I saw you going back and forth a bunch too with some of our different suppliers and pricing and things. Have you seen more competition in Mexico and a lot of lower prices coming down?
Definitely. Suppliers are very aggressive lately because they have to put their volume somewhere. They have been idle for a while, for 3 months, so they're a little bit desperate in some cases. So they're looking for new markets, including Mexico, Latin America. They're looking at as a good options to put their products, and they're markets that they're not their natural fits, but they're looking to the extra cost of freight, and they're willing to go the extra mile to supply those markets with very aggressive pricing.
Yeah, it seems like it'll definitely be an opportunity for suppliers to break into new markets and companies and things like that, with offering, you know, in some cases kind of crazy low support price and just to place inventory. A little bit of restructuring in some companies where they're typically supplying. So it'll be interesting to see as plants come back and you know, raw material usage and demand does go back to somewhat normal. You know, what those pricing and things like that look like. So definitely be interesting. June, I think, as stuff picks back up. Keep an eye on pricing and see what happens for July with where stuff settles. If crude and propylene and things like that still start to go up, you know, we may see some increases as companies get back to normal and demand gets back to full. We'll see what happens. Featured products and new products. I think, you know, we're still looking at our sanitizing product line, things like isopropyl alcohol, ethanol, glycerin. I know Javier was looking at a couple other additives and products that would go into sanitizing, thickeners and things like that. So do still have that full line of products. Seems like the sanitizer demand may have peaked a little bit. I think as plants and companies start to go back to work, there may be some more industrial uses. I know we've had some people looking for IPA just to have a couple of drums sitting around their plant, just to sanitize their plant in between shifts and stuff like that. So as these plants come back up, we may see some more demand like that. So I think they'll still be, you know, relatively high demand for some of those products here for the coming weeks and months as plants get back open.
I think the shine on that diamond's off, you know, so, and it's, you know, but luckily the more industrial products that we handle, you know, not the pharmaceutical, these are going to start picking up. But you know, the personal care stuff has been good for the last few months. It's, you know, the glycerin and the IPA and the sanitizer products have been good. But you know, there's tremendous amounts of new capacities that have come up and flooded the market. A lot of people were using ethanol now because isopropyl alcohol got too expensive. A lot of fuel ethanol plants trying to convert to USP, but then now the demand is starting to really wane, so they might be a little late to that game. So, but yeah, you know, I think that for 3 months there hasn't been any production. You know, I drive around, I see construction happening, I see people out. You know, that's the one thing throughout this whole coronavirus thing. You know, the landscapers, the contractors, the carpenters, they've been out in full force, you know, so that's been sort of a positive thing. I think the real down the real downtrend has been in automotive production, and that's really had an effect on some of the markets that we serve, and now they're starting to come back up. So positive trends here.
Yeah, obviously, as we've kind of talked about throughout the podcast, I mean, we do have this full portfolio of industrial products, whether it is things like methanol, the oxo alcohols, obviously plasticizers. Happy to, I think demand's going to pick back up pretty quick, pretty much across the board. So we're happy to have conversations, wherever you might be located and whatever the product might be, as stuff starts to pick back up. Look forward to having these conversations over the coming weeks.
Yeah, and as a company, we're not restricting people from visiting with customers any longer. We are concerned about people flying and staying in hotels still, but I think that in certain regions of the country, I mean, where Cory is, where a lot of our customers are in the Midwest, I mean, coronavirus is it's not an effect at all on them. So we need to get back to work. So as a company, we will be, bringing people back to the office here within a couple weeks, and we're going to get back out on the road. Today, we've got another lunch, like I said, I mean, sorry, Cory, but no, we're not restricting people from visiting. We're remaining on top of what the protocols that are in place and making sure that we manage those protocols and that people aren't feeling ill or out and about. They're wearing their masks, they're wearing gloves where they have to. So there's no restriction, and it's going to get even looser in terms of restrictions as we go forward. I see a future of plane travel and hotels coming back soon. Maybe I'm overly optimistic, but and wanting it, I'm willing it. Hopefully in saying this, but just in our conference call on Friday with our sales team, we said, hey, there's no restrictions. You can get out, mainly car travel, your regional travel, that's fine. If people are willing to see us, which we're hearing now that people are willing to see us this week and a lot more towards the end of this month of June, we're going to be there. We're going to be visiting with folks, and we're going to be getting back to business, and it's exciting.
Yeah, and kind of a nice transition to where we typically talk about trade shows, which there obviously isn't too much to talk about here. Seems like stuff pretty much canceled through July, and now we're starting to keep an eye on some of these fall shows. I think the one half of it is if the venue and the show is willing to put the show on. The second half of it is, are people actually going to come? I mean, we're having conversations now about NPE next May and AFPM and things like that. The show can go on, that's great, but if companies aren't going to allow travel or people are still restricted with plane travel and hotel travel, I mean, we may not attend a trade show this year. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the fall and, what those restrictions and things like that look like.
Yeah, an interesting discussion might be, these monster trade shows are more of an infection risk than maybe more small boutique trade shows. We've seen the smaller boutique trade shows really pop the last few years, and the big monster shows have actually been duds for us. I mean, it's I think the future is, the smaller trade shows with, with less people. I mean, NPE, you mentioned NPE. Okay, we might have domestic travel back, but international travel, that's a big part of the NPE is Latin America, Asia, Europe. Is that going to happen? I think that's going to be a little slower to matriculate here, because foreign countries don't have maybe as good a control, or their population has different dynamics where they can't control the spread of the virus. So there's a lot to play here. So for us, as we get together and we talk about trade shows, there's a lot of very difficult decision making going on because there's too many what ifs. But I think back to my original point, I think the smaller boutique trade shows, I think those will continue to be where it's at, and it's going to be all based on geography. Where you have in the show, is that a robust area for the chemical industry and trade? And I think that's key to having a good show. And those are the ones where you'll find TCC in attendance.
Yeah, that's a good point. It could be probably a whole podcast episode on itself, as these different kinds of shows coming up, whether it's an AFPM style show, NP massive show, a smaller kind of boutique hotel ballroom, traditional 10 by 10 booth show. I think we'd all agree we're more upset about, like the Chem and Agro show and AJ's Fertilizer show and stuff like that, where you kind of have these more intimate setup meetings versus, these big monster shows. I think that's going to be a trend for the coming years for sure, partially due to existing popularity and stuff like that, but also due to the coronavirus worries and putting whatever it is 50,000 people in a big convention center. I think we'll keep seeing that shift to some of these smaller shows being more beneficial overall.
Yeah, I agree. I think that also we're talking overwhelmed by talk about coronavirus and this sort of stuff, but the consolidation of our industry, the consolidation of industries as a whole, are kind of killing the creativeness that's going on in our industry. I mean, now there's mega companies and only a few companies like us that are up and coming and being dynamic and coming up with creative solutions and things like that. They're just these monster companies that are cost cutting and and M&A and consolidating. And so these trade shows, the value of them, these monster trade shows, is becoming less and less because it's harder and harder to break into this industry. And if you do, it's harder and harder to compete with these absolute giants.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll keep an eye on these trade shows, see what happens come fall, and obviously come next spring. We'd love to see everybody at the AFPM and shows like that, but I guess it's all going to be kind of up in the air at this point to see what that recovery curve looks like in the the future of trade shows overall. But wrapping things up, I mean, we'll see what June has in store, and maybe there's a chance we're all back together in July for the July podcast, I guess best case scenario, but we'll see what happens and obviously what the best situation is for the company and getting the offices back open, and we'll see what happens here come June. Anything else to wrap things up here for this month?
Stay safe and stay healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stay healthy.
Wear your mask.
Stay positive.
Stay positive.
Maybe Cory can get a haircut this month. We'll see. All right, guys. Well, as always, appreciate your time. Good to talk to y'all. Hopefully we'll see you guys in person here soon. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you streamed it, whether you did the audio or the video version. Appreciate you listening as always, and we will catch you here on the next episode.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks everybody.